I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is the Readathon. And I'm here with regular Readathonner Mel Barrett. Mel, hello, and who are you?
Hi, Rebecca. I am Mel Barrett. I am the host of the In Between podcast, which is an investigative true crime podcast that you can listen wherever you listen.
So, Mel, I just want to start the show by saying something.
Yes.
Regular listeners of mine know that I'm not a religious person. I'm a self-described atheist on many occasions, although I respect people who are religious. I don't want to get anybody's guff up. But today, I found myself saying, Lord, grant me 1/5 or 1/10 or 1/20th of the confidence of Dr. Laposata.
Oh my God.
I know, right? We're going to talk about a lot of stuff today, but we got to start with Dr. Laposata. This is the defense pathology witness. She's a forensic pathologist, tons and tons of experience, was the ME for the state of Rhode Island, has had a consulting business since then, teaches at Brown. So much experience, so many awards, and completely unflappable in her sureness about what happened. What are your general thoughts about this witness?
She was amazing. Like you said, she was unflappable. Her confidence, I don't even know if it was confidence as much as she just didn't take any bullshit. She doesn't take any bullshit from anybody.
No.
And least of all, Hank Brennan. She treated him like he was a bad child.
Well, turns out she knows him.
Yes, she does.
As we learned just before lunch, Hank has hired her. Jackson said 4 or 5 times, and then Hank said, no, just a few times. I'm like, dude. How many is a few? And actually, I looked it up, and one of the cases where he hired her was for the defense of Nancy Kerrigan, the figure skater Nancy Kerrigan's brother, who was charged with being involved in her father's death. Her father died of a heart attack, but they were also having an altercation. And it basically, Hank Brennan won that case because of in large part because of Dr. Laposata's testimony about Mr. Kerrigan's pre-existing heart condition. So she knows him. He knows her, and he treated her, frankly, extremely differently than he's treated any other witness in the case. Did you notice that?
I did. Imagine if that's how he dealt with the other witnesses. I think the jury would like him so much more. And he might have been able to make better points if he had treated them like that.
Yeah.
Instead of being so confrontational and just going into jerk mode. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He still pressed her. And when he did, she was just like, come on. That was her. It was just like, no. That's ridiculous.
It was exactly how one should respond when being challenged with something that either isn't true or is a distortion of the truth. And we will get into the substance of what she talked about, I promise. But I just want to talk about the cross-examination, just the vibe of it. Right before lunch, Hank Brennan asked to be able to impeach Dr. Laposata based on the criticism over her handling of the station nightclub fire, which was a horrific fire, that they tried to reach her on the scene for 17 hours and she refused to go. And this audit that was done in 2005 after a new health commissioner took over in the state of Rhode Island and asked that she change the way that she worked in her office. But the audit itself said that there were, 1,500 unsigned and complete death reports. She then resigned, and he was given permission to impeach her on those two things. And then he gave up that line of questioning super fast. And let me just throw my theory out there, because he did ask her a question about each, and she about the station thing was like, no, we actually were able to show phone records that showed that they never tried to call me, but also I was at my office doing my job and I had my investigator there. And the second one, she was like, no, they were going to cut my budget, and that's why I resigned. He gave it up immediately, and it made me wonder if the reason he actually asked permission for this was so that later he could tell her the judge said he could do it or something, because he just gave that up almost immediately.
I felt like he gave it up because her answers were so solid. Like you said, she was unflappable. Imagine being asked on national television in front of an entire courtroom and the world watching why you didn't show up to a mass death scene as the ME and being dragged through the papers. He basically was feeding into whatever the papers had reported about her at the time. And she literally was like, no, that was all just ridiculous. She was like, it was ridiculous. I got the call. As soon as I found out what was happening, I headed to the office and I sent my investigator over there, and they were there the entire time. And I was getting the office ready to receive all of these horribly dead bodies, you know? And then one of my favorite parts about her response to when she resigned, she said that the reason she resigned was because they were cutting the budget, and that meant that if she didn't resign, they were going to lose basically one of their medical examiners. She didn't want to do that to the state of Rhode Island. She'd been in the job for 12 years, being on call 24 hours a day for 12 years. And she thought, well, I should be the one basically to step down, and so someone else doesn't lose their job. I'm fine.
Yeah.
And she said,
she said it was bullshit.
Yeah, she said it was bullshit. She said any of the reports about her.
She literally said bullshit.
And then she giggled.
Yeah. And then she giggled. Oh, sorry.
Yeah. But she basically said, I was on call 12 hours or 24 hours a day for 12 years. And she said, and it was an honor, but I didn't want someone else to lose their job. So I stepped down.
Right.
And I just thought, she's the best. And she's so smart. I was really worried about her on the first day because the jury probably can't hear this, and the rest of the courtroom can't hear this because we're the only ones who can hear the mics for the live feed. But she's like,
she's got a wheeze.
Like she's got a wheeze, and
almost
she's
like an
breathing.
asthmatic wheeze. Yeah.
And so I thought in the beginning that she was nervous, and I just realized she's a little bit older, and she seemed a little bit jittery in the first day. And then as soon as she started talking about her work, there was no hesitation.
None.
There was no jitters. And there was, even when she was breathing hard, it was because she was talking so fast. And yeah, she was amazing.
So I just want to say something else about her and her interactions with Hank Brennan. Hank Brennan has this cross-examination habit of trying to trip people up by stating things, sometimes incorrectly or whatever, and then making them repeat it back, and then making it seem like he knows something that the person doesn't know.
Yep.
And she immediately just began correcting him. So one of the first questions he asked her was about, quote, subdermal hemorrhages. And she said, you mean subdural hemorrhages?
Yeah. She corrected him on everything.
And then he asked about the Guzma coma score. And she was like, you mean the Glasgow coma score? And he said, well, there's Glasgow and there's Guzma. And she was like, no, there's Glasgow. Not. And he just let it go. And it's like, yeah, I have been saying that he lacks sort of intellectual capacity for certain language stuff. Yeah. And she wasn't letting it go. And she started by she was not mean and strident like some of the other witnesses who were on the defense. She was funny. She was sharp from minute one when he said good afternoon, and she was like, actually, it's technically in 7 minutes you can say good afternoon. So it's still good morning for now. It wasn't like Welcher. It wasn't like Shannon, Burgess. It wasn't like these other cops, these prosecution witnesses who just became so angry when they were crossed, right?
Her niceness compared to the other witnesses, but I honestly don't. What I was thinking is it's really Welcher and Burgess who stand out to me. And I think what I've realized about them is that they were acting the way they were acting because they were insecure about the work they'd done. They were insecure about, what they'd come up with. And if they're sitting there reading Arca's reports and they're sitting there reading Laposata's reports, I just think that they don't feel totally confident in the work that they did. And that's why they were taking that aggressive approach to it.
Yep.
And I mean, I know people like that, when people get challenged and they feel insecure about the work they've done, they almost just take it, 100% in the opposite direction and just try to be an asshole about it.
Yeah. So let's roll back a little bit. At the beginning of court today, there was a hearing. And finally, on day 30 of the trial, Alan Jackson spoke up and complained about Hank Brennan's improper questioning of defense witnesses about his other witnesses. He opined, now I'm using that word because they use it so often, that Hank Brennan opened the door for them to discuss dog bites with Laposata because he tried to pre-impeach Laposata as it related to dog bites with Dr. Russell. Jackson says it's a pattern. They pulled the tape. The exchange lasted for 6 to 7 minutes, and that Brennan purposely essentially told the jury about Laposata's dog bite report, and then the jury will now wonder where that is, because then Brennan then asked for it to be excluded, and Judge Cannoni excluded it. So Jackson said this has constitutional implications. Reed is entitled to a fair trial. And of course, Hank's rebuttal was wild and maddening. And Beverly Cannoni still didn't let her testify to dog bites, but did let her testify to animal bites, which partially, I think is okay and partially not.
I think it's 100% not okay. I think at this point, it's really just getting ridiculous. I think that's what I texted you earlier when I was getting caught up. I was like, how much longer can this go on? So, and she had another one later in the day that I was just like, what? For this woman who has, Jackson was like, she has taught no fewer than 13 courses that include dog bite pattern recognition. The only thing that I will say is that I'm not a lawyer, but I don't think that they're allowed to have two witnesses who are testifying to the same expertise.
Okay, well, someone can write in and let us know what the answer is.
Yeah, I'd love to know the answer to that. I feel like I heard that somewhere. And so that would have been a pretty strong argument against her. But the idea that either one of these women is not qualified to talk about dog bites when she teaches classes on it. Mm-hmm. Because one of the things that Bev said when she didn't allow her to testify about dog bites was that she hadn't written any papers. Mm-hmm. I was like, are you kidding me? Yeah. The woman teaches classes on it.
That's a bar that Hank Brennan has introduced to the trial. The peer-reviewed papers. He's introduced that, and now Bev thinks it's true. He has definitely taken advantage of that emotional reaction she has. And seemingly, and I hate it. I, again, hate the whole idea that people call her biased. I don't think that's what's wrong here. I don't think she woke up this morning thinking, how can I fuck over the defense? But I do think she has some inherent, unintentional decision-making that appears to be biased. I think it's pretty clear that she has some personal disdain for some of the people sitting at that defense table.
I would agree with that, but my opinion is starting to change.
Okay.
I will say. I don't think she's waking up and saying, how can I fuck the defense? But I am starting to think that she's waking up and saying, how do I get this over with and get the Commonwealth out on top so we can be done with this? And that the last thing on my record is not a Commonwealth case going down in flames because it was so bad.
That's fair.
I mean, and just based on the past couple of days, honestly, and what she's turned down for, as far as the defense is concerned, and the fact that she keeps pushing off. Okay, here's a question I have. So yesterday with this curative instruction, all right, so I was rewatching it. She got really snippy with the defense while they were trying to work out what the wordage would be. It's really important to them. Mm-hmm. What happened in, I think, other courts might have been a mistrial. If it's not a mistrial in her court, then the defense has every right to sort of figure out, they should have been in charge of writing the words, honestly, and giving them to her because she owed them at that point. Mm-hmm. If she's not going to do a mistrial and she's not even going to tell the jury that the prosecutor, it's not about him lying. She's not even telling the jury that he made a mistake. She's only telling the jury. And what she ended up reading to the jury and saying the instruction to the jury.
It wasn't what she said she was going to say.
It wasn't what she said she was going to say. It had almost no weight whatsoever.
Yep.
And so the idea that at the end of court yesterday, when Alessi is like, I am putting in a motion to, for a curative instruction, and the fact that she keeps pushing that off and won't even hear it, it's not just that the curative instruction is important. The timing of it is also important because she's now given the jury an instruction. If she waits till Friday or Thursday to be like, oh, and by the way, do you remember 3 days ago when you saw the back of John's shirt and this happened? She's taking the weight out of it at every turn.
Right.
And that really says something to me. I've been trying to be balanced about it. I've been trying to not be like a conspiracy theorist and be like, oh, the entire everything is corrupt and the whole state and the judges and the blah, blah, blah. Because I've seen other judges not be corrupt in this case. Like the other judge that handled when the defense walked in the middle of the Turtle Boy trial when Brennan was standing up.
Yes.
And then the whole defense walked in. I don't even remember what that was about. But I watched that judge be so balanced. And so I know it's not the whole state of Massachusetts. And I know it's not all judges. But when a judge has this much power and there's a woman's life on the line and a man is dead, there needs to be more weight on someone trying to defend themselves. it may be that she wants to get out the door, but I don't think it's just that. I think she wants to get out the door and she wants a win for the state.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about the substance of some of Dr. Laposata's opinions. I don't even want to call them opinions because she stated them as if they were facts.
Yeah.
So she talked about the pattern injury on John O'Keefe's head. The horizontal scar, of course, goes across. And there, it's called undermined, where there's some pattern injury below it, and then there's these long vertical lines above it that are like 1.5 inches long. And she's able to tell from this pattern that his back of his head hit something that had a fine granular pattern to it, and something that had a linear or ridged pattern that actually broke his scalp open. So he fell onto something that was ridged, and then either then slid down or did something that created this granular scraping pattern. Yeah. And what was interesting was Alan Jackson did something else today, finally on day 30, where he copied Hank Brennan's technique of asking questions with inadmissible stuff so the jury would know it existed.
Yep.
And he had her talk about the fact, of course, there was an objection and it was, struck, that she had actually looked at photos from inside the garage at some point.
Yeah.
So there's something in that garage that matches those head wounds. Yes or no?
Absolutely. I mean, but I think that, it could even be something, it could be the steps, you know what I mean? It could be the steps going into the house from the garage or something like that. There could be so many things in the garage. He could have fallen back and hit his head on, cinder blocks, something like that, whatever was in the garage. And
a set of weights, perhaps.
Yeah, one of the things that Russell and Laposata have done that I've really thought was amazing is they've always added to their answers, well, we would know the answer to this if it had been investigated.
Right.
And they're the ones who are getting in this investigation. Like, we can't tell you exactly what happened because the investigation was so shitty. And they're not saying that, but, they're saying if it had been investigated, I would be able to tell you that. But the idea that nobody went into the garage, the idea that nobody went into that house, and the paramedics saw the injury on his head. I just don't understand why no one communicated and said, it doesn't look like he fell backwards and hit his head on grass or snow.
What was interesting to me was that Laposata had so carefully studied and remembered without looking at them the scene photos.
Yeah.
I mean, she told Jackson that falling on the grass could not have caused the injury. The tears on his scalp would be a star pattern. There's no vertical scraping on the skin with that. And there's no grass in the wound, nor a crisscross pattern that actual grass would create. Now, later on cross, Hank asked some weird questions that kind of implicated the rock. He said, how do you know there wasn't something under where his head landed? And she said, because I saw the photos. They shoveled and I saw what was there and it was grass. Yeah. And he's like, how do you know there wasn't any rock under the grass, or there wasn't an impediment or whatever he called it? And she's like, because there wasn't. I looked at the photos and I remember his hat being near him. She remembered. Like, her memory was spot on. I don't think she looked at a report a single time today, did she?
She may have looked at photos, like when they brought photos over to her.
Which we'll discuss at length.
Yeah. Actually, in the end of her testimony today, I thought was brilliant moving into Rentschler, but we'll get there. I think she proved, despite her age, that her memory is so good. And like you said, she did not waver. Every time he tried to get her, there were times where he would go on for 5 minutes, almost asking the exact same question in different words. Yep. And she would go, no, absolutely not. Not in this case.
What do you mean?
In this case.
I don't understand you. No, it doesn't matter because he wasn't hit by a car, my favorite.
When you were doing differential diagnosis, did you look at any information that would tell you what the speed of that impact may have been or allegedly was?
Well, it didn't hit him, so it doesn't matter.
Exactly. She was so adamant about it, and she was looking right at the jury when she said it. But there were so many moments. What I liked about the direct was that, Jackson really broke down every point that the prosecution tried to make. Was the cut over his eye from the spoiler? No.
Does she know what a spoiler is? Yes. And what would it look like if it had been the spoiler? She described it in detail.
I believe in the testimony from their Dr. Wolf, from the brain surgeon. I think he even said that when you fall backwards, you get that star pattern.
You typically get the star pattern, yeah.
And John didn't have that.
Nope.
And so their expert said it, And the defense's expert has said it now. And I hope the jury really picks up on that it was not a star pattern.
Yeah. So she also talked about hypothermia and very confidently didn't give an opinion, explained and showed how brutal that Lucas machine is that gave him compressions from when the ambulance picked him up to the hospital all the way through.
Do you want to explain what the Lucas machine is?
Yeah, the Lucas machine basically is the mechanical version of somebody sitting over you and doing chest compressions. You see
Watch
it on the pit. Quite a bit. It's kind of a plot point on the pit, the Lucas machine. Yep. And she was able to, they got some of this from Dr. Irini Scortibello, but she was able to more confidently look at the mucosa inside John O'Keefe's stomach, look at the lesions, and say, no, these were caused by the Lucas machine, and here's how I know. Confident as hell. Plus, she also added that he didn't die of hypothermia because if someone dies due to exposure, you see frostbite changes in their skin, and there were none there. And this is the moment where I wrote in my notes, she's a quiet person. She's confident as hell. And almost like her being a quiet person almost underscores her confidence, or at least it did for me.
I believe you said she was confident as fuck, but that's fine.
Yeah.
Yeah. One of the other things that I thought was interesting with the hypothermia, especially when Brennan started trying to push hypothermia, and we'll get into this in the cross because this was a really interesting cross.
So interesting.
So interesting. The other reason he couldn't have died of hypothermia is because she said that the injury to his head was instant death.
Yes.
She actually called it, what
did
she call it?
The harbinger of death.
The harbinger of death. This injury specifically, the amount of damage to his head and his brain would have caused instant death.
Or instant incapacitation at the very least. He would have had some twitching maybe.
So you can't really get hypothermia if you die instantly.
Right.
Basically.
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing, she was describing this injury in some pretty graphic detail that we haven't heard before.
Yeah.
Such as his brain going into the hole where the brainstem is. Where the brainstem and the spine interact, and there's like a hole at the bottom of the skull, obviously, and that his brain was like sort of slipping into that hole, and therefore compressing the functions to his heart and his lungs. And so that's what she called it, the harbinger of death. It was brutal, but at the same time, I think it provided a concrete understanding in a way that even Dr. Wolf didn't do. So can we talk about this kind of like bombshelly thing that happened today?
Yeah, you want to talk about the x-rays?
Yeah. So I was on Court TV last night, and Mr. John John DePietro,
whatever,
asserted something that I have seen on social media really in a strong way since late 2024. Coincidentally, that's also when Hank Brennan took over the case, although I'm not necessarily blaming him for this necessarily. That there were no x-rays taken of John O'Keefe, and especially of John O'Keefe's arms. Dr. Welcher, in his testimony, made kind of a big deal of this. We really can't say for sure that John O'Keefe doesn't have any broken bones in his arm because there were no x-rays taken. The x-rays I saw were only of his torso. Now, online, you've got Jen Coffendander, John DePietro, all these anti-Karen people saying over and over and over again that why would they x-ray a dead person? There's no x-rays of the arm. And today, Alan Jackson pulled out poster-sized, literally
giant, like
it was like when you buy
huge.
One of those posters at a concert and they have to put it in a tube and it's like zip.
Yep.
Poster-sized pictures of x-rays of John O'Keefe's arms,
wrists, legs, everything.
No swelling, no breakage, no tissue damage, period. Where the fuck have these x-rays been?
Can I just say, these guys are playing chess. Hank Brennan's playing checkers. The defense is playing chess. And they have been sitting on those x-rays since the moment Welcher said it. But I wanted to go back and figure out who was the first person who said there were no x-rays.
That's what I want to figure out too. What's the origin story of the no x-rays?
I don't think it was Welcher. It came before Welcher.
I've seen it on social media. From December, there was a tweet from Jennifer Coffendander, alleged former FBI agent, who said there were no x-rays. It's been a John DePietro talking point. It's been a Yellow Cottage Tales dude talking point over and over and over again. And it's become a way to sort of discredit this concept. And it was, you know what it was? It was pre-impeachment of Arca is what it was, because they knew that Rentschler was going to get up there. And we all saw it in the video, that arm flapping around, even at 10 miles per hour, that wrist would be broken and that shoulder could be dislocated.
It's so crazy to me to think that there are a group of people out there that are saying there were no x-rays, so that you can't prove that his bones were broken.
Right.
But there were also no bruises. There was no road rash or anything like that. But I guess my point is this. A medical examiner, whether they take x-rays or not, is going to look at a body and understand if a wrist or an arm is broken, because there's going to be bruising and because there's going to be a weird bend to it. You know, that argument has always been so weak and so weird to me. And now for them to be like, oh, and by the way, there are x-rays, I was blown away by. When you texted me that, I was like, you got to be kidding me.
Yeah,
you got to be kidding me.
It makes me wonder where they've been. I think I heard them say that they received them in early May or something. That's what I thought I heard them say in court. So I don't know what the deal is. This is why I want to know where they came from, because Welcher didn't have them in his materials.
Or at least we don't think he did.
He said he didn't. So either he's lying about having them or he wasn't provided with them. And like the most charitable interpretation of that is that the prosecution didn't have them either. That's the most charitable version of this story.
Where did they come from?
I don't fucking know where they came from. I need to know where the x-rays came from.
Why did no one ask Scorty Bello?
And why are they printed so big? It's all a mystery.
I think the defense was like, blow these up. Blow them up.
Let's go to Kinko's, motherfucker.
Kinko's does not exist anymore.
Let's go to the printer inside Staples. Let's get the science fair poster sized.
Put some foam core on the back of those.
Put them in a giant plastic sheet like that shirt.
He had like 10 of them just rolled up, and I remember when he was up at the podium and he started trying to unroll them and the microphone was like, you know, it was just like, what are you doing, dude? Put them on foam core, do something. God.
Put them on a sandwich board and walk around the courtroom wearing them.
I know. Where was Alessi with like the Vanna White with the x-rays? You know, come on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This was an incredible moment. So, you know, aside from the fact that she was able to confirm that there were in fact no broken bones, in his cross-examination, the x-rays weren't even mentioned, of course.
No.
But then he did try to ask her some questions that she just immediately shut down. You know, could this also have been caused by, you know, falling on the lawn and his head moving, perhaps because of the hat? And she was like, no. Plus, I looked at the pictures. It is a flat piece of ground with grass on it, and that's not what caused the injuries. Like, no question about it.
Like, one of the best examples of how she got inside of his head was in the very beginning when he asked her if John was thrust.
Yes.
And she was like, what do you mean thrust? What are you talking about? And he kept trying to explain it. And he asked her like 5 times. And she was like, he fell over and this is how he did it and blah, blah, blah. And then he pulls out her report and quotes her as saying thrust.
Right.
And she's like, I just explained to you what thrust is.
Yeah, it's somebody being pushed back.
He did something today too. You know how he has that tell where he goes...
Yeah, I saw the new tell today.
Yeah, there's a new tell today.
Where he would repeat back the answer that they just said.
So the tell that I saw is he would ask her a yes or no question. Like, he wanted a yes, and she would go, no. And he would go, oh. he would just go, oh.
And then he would ask exactly the same question a second time, and she would say, no.
No.
Again.
And he would go, oh. It was so funny to me. Yeah. Also, and speaking of, just to go back to the pit for a second, did you see my note? Sitting in between the court reporter.
I've been saying this the whole fucking trial. There's a woman sitting in front of Judge Cannoni. I've been showing Kevin.
It's Dr. King.
She looks just like Melissa King. Of course, played by Bryan Cranston.
I thought it was Dr. King. I was like, what's Dr. King doing in the
She looks
in the
just
courtroom?
like Mel King from the Pit.
Just like her.
It's incredible. My other favorite thing that he did, because he keeps bringing up this irrelevant information and asking witnesses if they consider it. Did you consider the witness statements you heard? Of course. Which ones did you hear? I can't answer that. Can you give me an example? Incredible.
Nope. And then he would go,
that's a fucking expert testifying, because she can't bring in something unless he does, and if he does, he's leading her, right? So there's just like she either knew all the tricks or she's just so naturally good It was incredible. And that was another thing that he dropped immediately. Like, she got him to drop lines of questioning in a way that no other witness has been able to.
She got him to drop the questioning about if she's an actual like neurosurgeon.
Right.
He was trying to compare her to their Dr.
Wolfie, yeah.
And she was like, I don't do that.
Yeah.
She's like,
I'm not a brain surgeon.
I don't operate on people who are alive.
Right.
What are you talking
about? But then
about?
he would say, then how can you know about the progression of the injury to his brain? She said, because the body told me from my like long experience studying this and doing autopsies, like I know the human body and that's how I know. Like, how do you respond to that, right?
And then he also kept asking her sort of general questions. So he would say, at one point he said a classic wound to the head. And she's like, what do you mean? Everyone is different. There are no classic wounds.
There's no such thing as a classic wound to the head.
Good God.
It was really, really incredible. I think my favorite moment in this trial so far, and that is saying a lot, considering that Yuri Buchanan read sexy texts and Dr. Marie Russell went, oh! My favorite moment in this trial was when he asked her, and this was an attempt to discredit her saying that it was John's brain that broke his orbital bones to cause those black eye injuries. He said to her, isn't the brain soft? Isn't it like tofu?
You mentioned that the orbital bones were broken and you had opined that it was caused by the brain. Do you agree that a brain is very soft, consistent with, for example, tofu?
Oh, gross.
And then Bev said, I'll strike that. No comments.
Yeah. It was incredible and it was funny. And she was like, I guess it depends on the kind of tofu you have, right?
Yeah.
Very interesting is that he tried to play one of Dr. Wolfram Arca's videos for her where it showed his arm being hit, the dummy's arm being hit by the taillight and him spinning around.
It was the 29-mile-an-hour one, I believe, or it could have been the 24, but it was not the one.
24 because he didn't go flying. He just spun around on his little.
Yeah, it wasn't the direct impact. It was just the one where his arm hit and the taillight shattered.
Right. So do you see anything in the video that would suggest contact with the mannequin in the video's bumper? She had said again and again and again that I am not a biomechanist. I'm not a biomechanic. This is not the work I do. How many times did she say that? So she basically made it so that he can't bring that shit in. And then he asked her a question about it. I think that's why it was not only struck by Bev, but that she then gave the jury a special instruction about it. When I say something is struck, it means you cannot consider it when it comes to this witness. What do you think about that?
I took a note and I said Bev strikes everything up to right before the video is played. So right before the video is played, she's like, tells the jury that they can't, pay attention to it, whatever. And then while they're sort of moving around the court, they're getting ready to do other things. There's some whispering in the background. And from what I understand, this was a couple minutes later, but from what I understand, based on what I saw online, someone from the jury had a question about her striking things.
Yeah.
And so the court officer, I think, you could hear him whispering to her in the background.
That makes sense.
And then she says, hold on, I need to explain further what striking means. And then so she explains to the jury that striking means to completely disregard it. And so I thought it was interesting if it did come from the jury because she's been striking so much over the past couple of days. And I wonder if they're just starting to understand because this didn't happen as much during the prosecution's case in chief.
Right.
It's happening a lot, almost every day during the defense's case in chief.
And it's very often happening with Hank Brennan bringing stuff in.
That's my point.
Yeah.
My point is the jury understanding that the things that are getting struck are because Hank Brennan is being disingenuous. Or he's doing something he's not supposed to be doing. Because the jury, I think, does pay attention to that, but I think they're used to defense attorneys doing that kind of thing.
Yeah. Well, they're not. They shouldn't be used to anything, as I'm sure. I mean, they're not professional jurors, but yeah. I mean, in terms of what they'd expect.
If you watch like a courtroom drama, you expect the defense attorneys to sort of be a little bit shady because they want to try to get away with something.
Law & Order, like Elizabeth Marvel's character, for instance.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't think that they're expecting the prosecutor to do that, but I think the jury is starting to clue in. If they're asking questions like that, I think they're starting to realize, wow, she's been striking a lot of things. It started with The Rock on the field trip. She's been striking some really big things. And then yesterday when they had to bring the shirt out again and say what, that crappy instruction that she gave them, I think they're really starting to question it's interesting because the defense isn't having to make the case for the state being shady. They're doing it themselves.
I wonder if they're going to bring it up in closing.
I'm interested to know what they're able to say, what they're allowed to get away with in closing, because I know they're not going to be able to say the prosecutor lied to you.
No, they can't say that. Opening and closing, she's going to instruct them are not evidence, but they can say things that aren't in evidence either. Like they can say, Lally said the last time during closing arguments about the embedded stuff in the shirt. They said that. Hank did an interesting thing today that he often does, where he tries to make testimony so boring that the jury tunes out. Mm-hmm. And he did that today, I think. And that is a tactic. I've seen lawyers talking about it. He was trying to get her he was trying to really drill down on hypothermia and the amount of degrees per hour a body temperature changes. Again, she did not bite. He would say, is it possible that someone would be alive in the snow and then dead in the snow? And wouldn't that change the temperature of the... She literally was like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she frustrated him, and I heard that the jury was a little bit antsy today during his cross, but she frustrated him kind of out of that. It just wasn't working. Did you notice the same?
I did, and I also noticed there were, I will say, just to be a little bit more balanced from my perspective, Hank did have a couple of interesting points that he made that I think that could have gotten into the jury's head a little bit. One of those was, he was really trying to establish that John wasn't dead. Like, he didn't die instantly.
Yeah.
And that ties into the hypothermia. That ties into a lot of things. But one of the things
Karen's cruelty.
Yeah.
That's really what it's about. That's emotional. It's like she left him to die. Like, that's for sure.
Story. That's their. No, she didn't. I mean, even if you listen to the interview clips or that woman leaving the messages, like Karen leaving those messages for John, shows someone who is anything but not interested in what's happening with John. But one of the things that he brought up, which I thought was a really smart. I feel like for a second she hesitated, and I was like, that's the first time I've seen her do that, is when he was trying to establish the scrape that was on the side of his nose.
Yeah.
Laposata described it as a scrape and not an incised cut. So basically, the difference is a scrape is something that, the thing that's scraping is round. An incised cut would be like the cut of a blade, like it would be an actual cut into the skin.
The thing that can scrape, you can have a sharp point, but it's not a sharp item like a knife.
Right, exactly. And this exchange I thought was interesting because he asked her, did you know about Karen Reed's statement about pulling glass out of John's face? And she was like, no. And he said, she said that she pulled a piece of glass out of John's face right where that scrape is. And, if he was dead, would his blood be pumping? And she said, no, if he was dead, his blood wouldn't be pumping.
But you know what would make it be pumping? Compressions.
For sure.
Yeah.
But, and the thing is, Laposata was like, yeah, well, if you pull a piece of glass out, you're going to have superficial blood, but you're not going to have it spurting everywhere. Right. And it didn't spurt everywhere. Right. And he's like, but you just said that it wouldn't be an incise wound, that glass would be, a sharp blade or whatever. And she's like, no, I didn't. I didn't say glass.
And then she said it could be a piece of glass if it was a thick piece of glass.
Yeah.
Which obviously a cocktail glass is, a thick piece of glass. So I think that's what he's trying to intimate there.
I just think that line of questioning was one tiny moment that could have gotten into the jury's head.
Could have, but with that, I mean, we can't know what the jury thinks.
Yeah.
But.
And then right after that, because she was like, when he makes the comment, she's just completely dismissive of him being crazy. And then she says, he goes, is it possible to blah, blah, blah? And she goes, well, anything's possible. It's just what's important to this case.
Right.
And he said, I'm asking for your medical opinion, not your advocacy.
And she went.
Yeah, exactly. And then, of course, objection. And then it was, there was a strike. But yeah, so interesting.
So let's talk about the redirect of Dr. Laposata. There was no recross, which is unusual for this trial. I think the only other person Hank Brennan didn't recross was Karina Kolakithis. What did you hear in the redirect of this doctor?
So Alan Jackson was really concise in the redirect. He only hit a couple of points, and they were gigantic points. And this guy is telling a story because this redirect led into the testimony of Dr. Rentschler beautifully. But he hit on the body cooling. So he went back because that was something that Hank was talking about with the hypothermia. And this point was amazing. And I was like, well, there it is. But basically he said, does a body know when it's dead? Does a body know if it's indoors or outdoors? And she said, no. And he said, would it cool at the rate you described if it was in a cool place indoors?
Yep.
I know he wanted to say like a garage. Yeah. And she said, yes. I thought that was a huge point. And then he pulled out the giant x-rays. And in front of the jury, she explained how to read an x-ray, which I thought was amazing. But the most important thing is that he showed the right arm. There were no deformities, no breaks, no fractures. There's nothing, no bruising, no anything. She walks the jury through the gigantic printouts, and I thought that line of questioning going right into Dr. Rentschler and his experiments and him talking about, the injuries on John's arm, I thought it was brilliant.
It was a really brilliant setup. It was foundational. Yep. And she was the fourth doctor who said that his injuries are not consistent, or the fourth person with medical experience that his injuries are not consistent with a car strike. So then we actually get a little bit of Dr. Rentschler on the stand today. He's quite tall. I like this guy a lot. He's very, very affable. He then, of course, talks about ARCA again and all the good work that he's done there, including some New England hockey safety stuff. Which I think was a little bit pandering, but funny. He, again, is asked, was he hired by the defense originally? No. Was he hired by an insurance company? No. Was he hired by a separate agency? Yes. And he basically sort of starts to outline the experiments that they did. He first talks about the experiments they did for the first trial, which we know wasn't for the trial. It was for the FBI investigation into something around this case. We actually don't know exactly what it was. My guess has always been either the cops or Hank Brennan or both. So he talked about the fact that they had no information. They were not allowed to look up the case. So all they were given was the car and the injuries, essentially, right? All the documentation around both. The first thing they tried was, did he hit his head on the taillight? Because, obviously they were told that there was, they saw the pictures, there was damage to the taillight. The answer was absolutely fucking not. Then as to the injuries on his arm, they then tested, could those have been caused by the taillight? What did you think about Rentschler today? Of course, this is just the beginning of his testimony.
Yeah, I think he's great. I think he's super smart. He's got a great personality. He's jovial, which I appreciate. I thought it was really interesting about the head testimony because one of the things he did say was they did a 10-mile-an-hour test with the dummy's head, and there was no fracturing in the head. And he said, but the issue there is just because there was no fracturing in the head, what we were seeing from those tests is that there would have been fractures or injuries or dislocations to the neck, the shoulder, the chest. Just because his skull didn't fracture from a 10-mile-an-hour test, at 10 miles an hour, he had massive injuries on his body.
Yeah.
So that I thought was super strong. He was asked to determine, if the injuries, this was right off the bat, were the injuries sustained by John, were they consistent with a vehicle collision? Absolutely not. And then one other thing, right before, I think I had to jump off here, but one of the last notes I took was that John had a laceration on his tongue.
I didn't know that. Did you?
I did not. And I wonder the only thing I can think of is if he was hit, if he was punched, sometimes when you're punched, like boxers, they clamp down. That's why they wear the mouth guards, because they would clamp down on their tongue. Yeah. So I'm wondering if something like that happened to him.
It could have. My favorite part about the beginning of Rentschler's testimony was he was talking about the work he does with the military, with the NHL, and then he talked about using a 50th percentile average weight hybrid 3 dummy, right? I know that Brennan is going to ask him, why did you mention that in your direct? And he's going to assume, intimating that the defense told him about all the dummy controversy. But Jackson very smartly asked, why do you use this particular 50th percentile average weight hybrid dummy? And he's like, because it's standard to use it, and you can make up.
It's the gold standard.
And you can make up for any weight differentials by doing a calculation. And that's what we do. We say this is how it would affect a lighter person, and this is how it would affect a heavier person. It's basically math. Last night when I was on Court TV, the dummy controversy happened in the segment before mine, and I got to listen to some of that. And this idea that the weight of the dummy not being the same makes a difference is completely wild. And, and as Wolf kept trying to point out, it was the dummy that Dr. Welcher used in his testing too, because it is the standard dummy. It's the standard one. And even for the NHL hockey players, huge fucking guys, they're using the 50th percentile average weight hybrid 3 dummy.
So I have a question for you. And this is about the jury. So I know some of these arguments seem kind of ridiculous to us, like what you're saying right now. Like the anti-Karen Read side will say they didn't do x-rays, and there was, pieces of the taillight in John's hoodie, and there's DNA on the bumper, and there's glass on the bumper, and all of these things lead them to believe that Karen is guilty. And it reminds me so much sometimes of our political discourse, where this confirmation bias, we sort of only hear what we want to hear if it bolsters our own case. What are your thoughts right now about where the jury is thinking along those lines? Because I can see a jury falling for Hank Brennan's antics.
Yes.
And I'm worried about that.
I'm worried about it too. And I'm worried about the power of asserting things again and again and again. I think that one of the things the defense must do, they absolutely, if they asked me, I would say one thing you absolutely have to do in your closing is remind the jury that there is no evidence of taillight embedded in John O'Keefe's shirt. That is an assertion. Yeah, that's an assertion they make TV? Over and over again. I said that last night.
You said it last night. I don't know if did you rewatch your tape?
I did.
Because did you see him respond when you said that?
He said there was testimony.
He said there was testimony.
There wasn't.
And he's wrong.
There wasn't testimony.
But do you see what I'm saying? I think he believes that, which means that somewhere along the line, that piece of information
has taken hold.
Is sticking in people's heads as fact, no matter how many times the defense corrects it. So how do you change that? How do you get into the minds of the jury that this is not actually fact? They've heard so much
They just
bullshit.
have to say it in the closing. They have to say, or I would say, something like, of the many things the Commonwealth has tried to convince you of, like, let me name a few, that the glass on the bumper is somehow relevant and came from a cocktail glass that it did not match, that all these pieces of taillight found on the lawn, the ones that were found by Trooper Michael Proctor, were no match to, any of the stuff, right? That, and it's just like list them. And in that list say that small pieces of taillight were, quote, embedded in the clothing when you heard testimony that the clothing was all in an envelope with debris, and that the technician made no conclusions about the red pieces of plastic in that debris, and there was no testimony that it was embedded in the shirt. None. No pictures, no testimony. I think that if they make that list, they must include that point. I mean, I feel like that for some reason, I don't know if one of the jurors talked about it in their interviews, but I feel like that talking point, it's the first thing that, like, my mom said because she does not familiar with the case. She just watches me on court TV, and she's like, well, what about the taillight? And I'm like, it's not true. It's not fucking true. And it's not in evidence. The taillight thing makes me crazier than just about anything else, as you may have gleaned from my facial expressions.
I feel
on
like
court
one
TV
side is
night.
reading the National Enquirer, and the rest of us are reading the National Geographic.
That's very kind. That's very kind.
But yeah, I'm a little bit worried about it. It really comes down to how much the jury trusts Alan Jackson. Do they think he's smarmy? I think is going to be my question. So we ended today with some scheduling. She heard a couple of very brief arguments. She still has not heard from Alessi about the curative instruction. And she also hasn't made a ruling about the missing person, the missing witness, which is kind of ludicrous. And that's my other thing. Today we learned that probably Thursday or Friday, this trial may wrap up and be handed over to the jury by as early as Friday, as late as Monday.
Monday, the latest.
So we know that Hank Brennan is going to call Welcher back, and he has, I think, 3 or 4 other witnesses that are all forensics people that are coming back. Hartnett's coming back. So I'm hoping that Alan Jackson or whomever is crossing them gets some of these questions right to the jury. Like this happens to, right before the jury goes to deliberate. They really dispel these sort of myths that we've been talking about. But we are wrapping up the case this week, it sounds like, and I am still very concerned that Michael Proctor was not called and that Brian Higgins wasn't called.
Yeah, same. Absolutely the same. Brian Higgins in particular. Of course, I would have liked Brian Albert too. I also have to think like, you know, one of the things I've been thinking about a lot is, and I've said it on the podcast in a different way about like, you know, this is what I want, but I can't have what I want because that's actually not relevant, is how much of the discourse around what the jury thinks is actually about like the personal battles happening online and on social media about this case, right? Mm-hmm. I often say when we're making edits on something at work, the person who ends up hearing this will have no idea what used to be there if we cut this.
Yeah.
Because the producer often thinks this tape is critical because it shows X, Y, or Z and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, it's not critical. But won't the listener wonder why? No, because it won't be there. It won't be there.
Because they will not know that it exists.
It's almost impossible at this point after following this case for more than a year. And by the way, today is the 1-year anniversary of the Readathon, by the way.
Oh, happy birthday.
It's almost impossible to imagine what this would be like without knowing all the stuff we know from trial one, but also from us fighting about it on social media. So I just don't know. I got to say, I just don't know. Reasonable doubt, I guess it always comes down to how a jury interprets that, even though the interpretation is literally, if you have doubt, you can't convict. Certainly, the reasonable doubt case is 100% there. 100%.
Absolutely. I think in the past couple of days, they've really, really slammed this case home. But I wonder if the jury is going to be sitting there going, why didn't we hear from Michael Proctor? They won't be questioning that if she gives that instruction.
Right.
And maybe they'll lump Higgins into that as well. But I really think she needs to give that instruction because, again, it's not fair if they go into jury deliberations wondering why Michael Proctor and Brian Higgins are not there. But I think it's going to be a really big shot to the prosecution if she gives that instruction.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to be at the end of a week where it's sort of been on display that the prosecution's being a little shady.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so if at the end of the week or even tomorrow or the next day, she says, oh, and by the way, they should have called this guy and they didn't, and you need to take that into consideration and it shouldn't affect the, reasonable doubt or the defense. I think that is just going to be another thing piled onto the prosecution. And I think the defense is winning the case this week, but I think the prosecution is losing the case this week by their antics.
Yeah. We'll see how the rebuttal goes. I'm looking forward to some robust cross-examinations in the rebuttal.
Welcher.
So tomorrow, we're going to get more Dr. Rentschler, probably for most of the day. I think probably at least 3 more hours of him with Jackson and then at least an hour of cross. I wouldn't be surprised that he took the whole day, although Hank Brennan did ask if he should have Welcher available tomorrow afternoon. And I'm like, ugh. You think Hank Brennan's going to tell him on the sly that there are, in fact, x-rays of John O'Keefe's arm?
I think that the defense is going to be all over that. It's very obvious to me that they held that ace just so they could have a big moment and really let the jury clue into the fact that these people have been lying to you.
I hope so.
And that's what all these motions hearings have been about. And, the motion to dismiss with prejudice, all of this has been about Hank Brennan being super friggin' shady and lying to the jury and lying to the court. And it's been going on all week.
It has.
It's been going on the whole entire case. But, it's really on display this week.
So, Mel, will you be watching the trial tomorrow?
Oh, absolutely.
I thought you were just going to be like, no, I'm not interested anymore.
Nah, I'm going to sleep in.
I'll be watching the trial tomorrow, too. And I'm sure we will text about it and we'll probably talk about it. So... Thank you so much for joining me on today's very beefy edition of the Readathon. And once again, Lord grant me 1/100th of the confidence of Dr. Laposata. Am I right? Can I get an amen?
Amen.
Thanks so much, Mel.
Thanks for having me.
Partners in Crime Media.